look how efficient we've been passing the ball for the last 9 weeks, right, through this little stretch that we've been in. I just think it kind of gets a little bit blown out of proportion. You know, Jaylen's quarterback rating's been over 100 most of the games. I don't know what he was today, but most of the games he's been over 100. We're averaging 8.5 plus in the pass game. Like, I just think a little bit's been a little bit blown out of proportion.
That was Nick Sirianni yesterday after the game. John McMullen's brought to you by Boardwalk Honda. Shop the lineup of new pre-owned and certified pre-owned Hondas online, boardwalkhonda.com. He said, listen, look how efficient we've been. And then yesterday, you had a team that really, they threw the ball 32 times, spread it all over the place. The top 2 receivers on the team, I think they had over 20 targets in the game. Was this the best offensive performance, or do we like the other way that they've been playing, where they just run you to death? John McMullen, Birds 365, and of course Sports Illustrated joins us now on a Monday after an Eagles win. And John, last week the talk was, of course, all about the passing game. Did they prove a point yesterday, or did they just do whatever was necessary to win?
No, they proved a point. In fact, you played Nick's clip. That's not true. I mean, you know, you had A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith talking about uncomfortable conversations. The week leading up to the game, you had last week after the Carolina game, you had A.J. and Devontae and Jaylen Herz and Nick Sirianni as well, and Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, et cetera, talk about the passing game's not where it needed to be, and that's what prompted those uncomfortable discussions. And then I think anybody watching the game, did you see a difference in the passing game? From the efficiency that Nick was talking about?
I saw a significant difference, John, and it's what we've talked a lot about, though. We've seen Jaylen do this. The question I had wasn't, can he do it? It's, why isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of it is you can't play the same. Obviously, these are human beings. You can't just play the same every single week. And he had a good week versus, a not-so-good week against Carolina, not-so-good week against Baltimore. So part of it is just playing better. But obviously, there's been a great emphasis by this organization to try to get this right before, as Jaylen described it, before it gets you. And that was Jaylen's description before yesterday. So, look, I get Nick's got to spin it the best way possible, but this whole organization was working this week to get the passing game on the right track, and to their credit, they did. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, they want to pretend it hasn't been an issue.
Well, and Nick brought it up after the game, the clip that the team put out on their social media. He says, you want us to run it? We can run it. You want us to pass it? How about that passing game? So, I mean, he played right into the whole storyline of the week.
Yeah, well, and, everybody knows what went on. So, I mean, but that's been this team before. They've had a tremendous run as a whole since 2022 and really the end of 2021. So, and they've always been able to run the ball. It's just gotten even better with Saquon Barkley. And they've generally been able to pass the ball until this season effectively. And for whatever reason, that's had gone away. And that was by far their best passing performance of the year.
So is this, what do you attribute this to then? Kellen Moore, Nick Sirianni just drilling it into Jaylen Hurts' head that, hey, the plays are there, you're not making them. Is this Jaylen understanding that? How do you kind of quantify what you saw yesterday? Jaylen Hurts making the plays that have been there for him to make in weeks past and him not making them.
Well, it's kind of well known that, after the 2-2 start that Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, and a few others went to Nick Sirianni and said, look, we're not playing well this way. Let's try to let's try to default back to a strong running game, and we got Saquon Barkley now. Let's see how that works. And it worked beautifully, and they kept winning games, and they kept sticking with it. But it got to the point where the unintended consequence of affecting the passing game. And now it's, as we said, AJ said he doesn't mind being the villain, pointing it out, putting the focus on it, saying, all right, we got to get this right before it gets us, as Jaylen Herz described. And they decided to emphasize it. They came out, and Nick today, and they came out with an empty set, used more empty sets than they've used all season. And Jaylen Herz talked about getting in a rhythm as a quarterback, and they got him in a rhythm. And they actively tried to do that. And I haven't been doing that. So, they made some adjustments, and they can see what this offense can be from a passing perspective. But I do agree, where I do agree with Nick is, look, if Saquon was more effective in that game and was running for 100-plus yards by halftime, they would have stuck with it. But it wasn't that type of game. Pittsburgh did a pretty good job, and they didn't do a good job. One of their weaknesses is the cornerback position, maybe their only weakness on defense, and the Eagles were able to take advantage of it.
John, you've been around Jaylen Hertz's entire career, so you could probably read him better than we can. What do you make of the way he opened his press conference yesterday? That's all. That's what you all wanted to see, huh? I mean, is that his way of saying I was really freaking annoyed with you guys? Or, I mean, I don't think it was him having some fun with you.
No, I think the part is that he, was happy he had a good game, happy he had a good passing game. I don't think he was upset at us. He understood. Like I said, if you rewind to his press conference after the Carolina game, he understood. The passing game isn't there at that present time. And he's the one who said that. We got to fix it until it gets us, basically. So he was. The ironic part of the whole week, I think, is, because of what Brandon said, everyone started talking about the personal relationship between A.J. Brown and Jaylen Herz. I said it on your show. I said it on my show. I think that sort of shadowed the reality that they were both on the same page and said, we got to fix this. And I'm stunned how many people didn't see that. Because they both said similar things that essentially trace back to, we got to fix the passing game. And to their credit, for 1 week at least, they did exactly that.
So what were some of the things that they did to fix it?
Well, number one, I said they came out empty. They tried to get them in a rhythm early, empty sets. They used more empty sets than they have all season. They took advantage, as I said, of corners that haven't done a great job this year in man coverage. And they have great receivers, and they're tough to cover. And for whatever reason, they haven't utilized them. And you mentioned all the targets, 23, I think, between A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. He only threw it 32 times, 23 of them to two really good receivers. And magically, good things happen when you get the ball to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
John, there was a lot of, speculation of what happened during the week. Jay Glazer, before the game on Fox, reported that, they got everybody in a room, and Brown and Hertz kind of dabbed it out and said that everything's cool with them. Brandon got up, and he apologized for his role. But I would imagine Nick Sirianni had some role in kind of getting them from Wednesday to Sunday ready to play.
Yeah, he's done a good job keeping everybody on track. I do think, again, it was a little bit overblown from the standpoint of, I think people took the Brandon Graham comments as gospel as far as a fractured relationship. And I never thought that was the issue. I thought the issue was not off the field; it was on the field in the passing game, and they fixed it. Mm-hmm. Again,
right. I just real quick to interject, and I think you're right about that, and that's what kind of got lost in the sauce was what AJ said and what Brandon went on to talk about were two different things that kind of got thrown into the same pot of stew.
Yeah, two completely different things. One was on the field, one was off the field. And, their relationship, their personal relationship, probably has changed over the years because, AJ's got a bigger family and Jaylen's got his he's engaged now. So, generally people can think about their own lives when they have families and things of that nature. And maybe you drift apart a little bit from your best friends and you're not hanging out all the time, but that doesn't mean you're not friends. It just means you're on to a different stage of your life. I thought that term was way overblown. And what AJ's comments were about, and again, it wasn't just AJ, it was Devontae, it was Jordan Mailata, it was Lane Johnson, it was Jaylen Herz himself. It was about the passing game. And I don't know who can debate that. I guess they can look at Nick's press conference like today where he's trying to essentially contradict himself from the locker room speech and pretend it wasn't an issue. They threw for 83 yards against the Carolina Panthers. Mm-hmm. How is that not an issue?
Well, and it's the most perplexing thing. Last week, I think, was like one of the most bizarre situations because, I'm no Jaylen Herz hater. I've been a pretty big supporter of Jaylen going back to his 2021 year where people wanted to trade for Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. And I said, you know what? I think I saw enough in 2021 to bring him back for 2022 and see if he can kind of build all that. He takes you to the Super Bowl. So, and he said something yesterday, just because you haven't done something doesn't mean you can't. But we've seen him do things. That's what made this all the more perplexing. And then last week was a culmination of, hey, they're not asking him to throw all that much. But when he does throw, okay, he's making plays. They find a big play. But last week against Carolina, there were plays all over that he just did not make. And that's where it was like, whoa, what's going on here? And that's why it was so weird.
And he talked about that rhythm, and they haven't been getting him in a rhythm early in the game. So I think it was pretty clear they came out with that mindset.
Oh, you know what? And by the way, it's something Brady brought up during the broadcast about how he liked how much they got into a rhythm and that they dictate the pace of the game when the offense does that to get into that rhythm. And I thought that's something Brady's been much maligned himself this year in his new job, but I thought he did a good job of explaining why that was helpful for Hertz.
Yeah, that's kind of an intangible thing, but I know when he gave him the Player of the Game award after I saw the clip of that, and he talked about it. Jaylen talked about getting in a rhythm, and I don't know why that's a surprise. I mean, if you watch quarterbacks, it's if you get them into the game early, if you get them a few easy throws. One of the things I've noticed about the Eagles in their slow starts this year, when they do eventually come out of it, it's usually when they're using tempo. So I asked Nick a couple of weeks ago, I asked Kellen Moore as well, why don't you go to tempo a little bit earlier? It seems to be what kickstarts you guys. And I said, we'll think about it. And, it was the empty sets more than tempo, but I think you saw them going a little bit quicker as well. And for whatever reason, I think Jaylen Herz likes that. And it's something that helps him get into the game, and maybe you'll see more of that. But if they continue to play like they played yesterday, they're going to be tough to beat.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be tough to beat.
And by the way, John, that's on a day where Saquon Barkley's not the best player on the field.
No. Well, and that's part of the reason. I mean, Saquon will tell you this himself, to his credit, he's not the best player on the field ever. That's A.J. Brown on the Eagles. And that's kind of the point. is you're not utilizing. The whole point of this roster, the way Howie assembled it, was to take advantage of all aspects of it. So if you do load the box to stop Saquon, you just throw it. And if you're trying to bracket AJ and Devontae Smith, you just run it. But they were only doing one part of that equation. And it was working. Won 9 consecutive. I always talk about it. It's about the margin of error. You have to play a certain way. And I thought that Carolina game revealed just how small that margin of error is. And it's almost to the point of, if Leggett makes that catch and you lose that game, I think more people realize, all right, this is too small. We got to get this passing game going. Now, to the Eagles' credit, they already figured it out. And they said, all right, we got to fix this now when we still have an opportunity to fix it. And they did it. And by the way, I think playing a good team, because they have tremendous respect for Pittsburgh, and that plays into it as well, because they probably, even though they won't admit it, they probably took Carolina for granted and didn't play as well. And with this game, they were hyper-focused in, because they thought if they didn't play well, Pittsburgh would beat them.
Well, and it's, I brought up, Nick 46-19 and how, he just says 1 and 1 and 1. It says, somebody texted in and said, anytime you bring up Sirianni's wins, you can't leave out what happened last year. And to which I think, John, that has already been acknowledged by the Eagles and Nick, is that they got rid of the coordinators. Like they addressed what they thought the problem was last year. So here they stand at 12-2. Do any of the thoughts of what happened last year enter your mind at all anymore?
No. One is a guy we haven't talked about and actually deserves more credit than the offense, Vic Fangio. And the second part is Barkley, because you have a better sort of foundation that's not going to fall apart, at least when he's healthy.
Quinyon.
Well, yeah, there's tons of, you have Zach Ball, there's tons of talent that they added. But I'm just talking about.
Let me ask you, we had this discussion in the 4 o'clock hour. This defense against Gannon's defense.
This defense is better.
Yeah?
This defense is better.
I mean, I said the one thing this team lacks is that team had Reddick, who was awesome that year. Bradbury was pretty good. I think the secondary, that Chauncey Gardner was probably better than this Chauncey Gardner. TJ and Kaiser were very good. Were they as good as these two guys? The one big difference is they had Reddick, and this team does not have a Reddick. I think the one big difference is you trust the guy dialing the play up more.
Yeah, Vic's special. If anything, I didn't, to be honest, when he got here, I didn't think anybody could live up to his reputation because it was so outsized to begin with. And he's been better, if anything, than this reputation would suggest. But just the consistency from all aspects. Yeah, they don't have the one pass rusher that they had, but, Zach Ball's playing at an all-pro level. Nakobe Dean has taken that big step forward. So if you want to just look at linebacker, TJ had a great year. He wasn't an all-pro. Zach Ball's an all-pro. And Nakobe Dean as the second linebacker would be way better than Kaiser White. TJ, I think you're right early, but lately he's been playing really well. To the point where, he's comparable to where he was in 2022. Reed's better than Marcus S. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The corners, Bradbury was a second-team All-Pro, so he had a tremendous season. You have to give him credit for that. But Quinyon's playing at a high level. Cooper DeJean might be the best slot cornerback in the NFL, as crazy as that sounds. They're both very good defenses, but I give the edge here. And if I had to default to why, it would be the linebackers. How crazy is that?
Yeah, right.
And the side, and it wasn't only me. If you go back to the spring and summer, a lot of people around this league who cover this league thought this was the worst linebacker room in the NFL. And it might be the best.
That's wild to say about the Philadelphia Eagles, by the way. They might have the best linebacker room in football. And it's funny because we were talking about Nakobe Dean maybe being the best linebacker way back in camp. We were talking about Jeremiah Trotter possibly being a guy to keep an eye on. I don't know that he's taken a snap this season. You had a couple other, guys, and it's been these two guys the entire season with, as you've mentioned, Zach Baun potentially being an all-pro player. Pretty wild. All right, John, let's get a couple quick hits on, one, Landon Dickerson. What do we know there at all?
Well, Nick got asked a question today. Obviously, he has, for people that don't know, he gives no information on injury, so we'll have a better indication on Landon Wednesday when they get back to practice. But I did see him in the locker room after the game. He was talking. He seems fine. So he's a tough guy. He wouldn't have been in the locker room if it were serious. So I think the Eagles are gonna be fine there. But he's been dealing with stuff all year, and just fighting through it. So it's something to keep an eye on. But he might be the toughest guy on the team. I'd be stunned if he's not out there against Washington.
Any insight at all on Barkley? What happened with him yesterday? They were speculating on the broadcast that something had to go on. Sirianni said, no, it's our 2-minute offense. Gainwell's in there. And then
he was hurt. He admitted. He admitted. He said it's not serious. He was visibly shaking his leg. It was his right leg, and he was trying to keep loose. And, sometimes they do go to Kenny in obvious passing situations because he's actually their best receiving back. So that's part of it. But clearly Saquon was dealing with something. He admitted it after the game. But he said it's nothing serious. That's, when you're a running back in this league and it's week 15 and you touch it as much as Saquon Barkley, you're banged up. That's part of it. That's part of the reason why it's so hard to break Eric Dickerson's record. You got to stay healthy to do that completely. Not just healthy to play the games, but healthy to play at a high level. And at that particular position, everybody's banged up because they take so many hits. And Saquon's no different, but it's not serious. It's not serious. And he came back in the game. And yeah.
What happened with Sirianni and Carter?
Well, Nick was going over to yell at him. It was a dumb play. And basically what people probably saw is Clint Hoerner getting in between. And basically Clint Hoerner was saying, I talked to him, I'll handle it. Didn't want him to do it twice. Clint had already reamed him out for it. Didn't want it to happen again. So it's just one of those things. Heat of the moment.
Yeah.
But it was a dumb play. And
no, it was a big play in the game too, that they didn't get the call.
Yeah, they got lucky because I think, Pittsburgh should have kept the ball, and they decided it was after the punt. I don't know. The angle I saw is certainly, you don't know when the ball's coming off his foot, but it was certainly before the ball went by Jaylen Carter. So it was very close. Bang, bang. And it could have really hurt them. They were still, the way they were playing, let's be honest, they were still going to win that game. But you don't want to say that to somebody who makes a bad mistake like that. They were punting the football. Remember, boy, that was a terrible decision by Mike Tomlin, too. It was 4th and 7 at the Eagles' 46. They were down 2 scores, and they punted the football and never got it back.
Never got it back. You ever see a 21? You ever see a 21-play drive?
Longest drive in the NFL this season. Longest drive for the Eagles since at least 2000. So, yeah, you rarely see that. They've had these monster drives for years now where they close it out in the so-called 4-minute offense. And that's what they call it in the NFL when you're trying to drain the clock. They had a 10.5-minute offense and drain the whole clock. that was such, and I have tremendous respect for Mike Tomlin. That was such a bad decision of not understanding the opponent. You're probably, they have a very limited offense. They're probably not going to make 4th and 7. They weren't playing well, but your job is to try to win the football game. And your only opportunity to win the football game is to turn that drive into points. And they should have shot their shot, and they never got another shot. That's a bad way to go about it, Mike.
Well, John, obviously the Eagles, maybe one of their most impressive wins of the season, 27-13. They beat Pittsburgh. 3 left. Detroit banged up now, so they're tied with 3 to go. This will be interesting. Vikings tonight, if they win, will have a 3-team tie at the top of the NFC East. So they'll continue this season with a lot to still play for. Washington comes up next. We'll get into that game throughout the week with John McMullen from Birds 365 right here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Mike.
John is brought to you, of course, each and every day here on the Sports Bash by Boardwalk Honda. Shop their lineup of new, pre-owned, and certified pre-owned Hondas online at boardwalkhonda.com.